Tonight on Free Minds TV, medical marijuana in New Hampshire, we've got the story and the exclusive interviews. Also, a court rules that California must release 1/3 of its prisoner population, and porn censors are going after Renaissance-era artwork. All that and a whole lot more tonight on Free Minds TV. And welcome to an all-new episode of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. With you, as always, is Toby.
And Nick.
I'd like to invite the viewers to log on to our website, freemindstv.com. From there, all the show content is posted, all the old archives, ways to contact and help out the show, and a whole lot more at freemindstv.com. All right, we've got a full show. We're going to be getting into some nanny state gun issues from around the world. But first, let's keep it local here in New Hampshire, where we're broadcasting from, because there's some new legislation coming up which could put New Hampshire as the 14th state to have medical marijuana legalized for sick and ill patients to smoke.
Yeah, and it has been something that's been gaining traction in other states. There are 13 states now, and it started with just one. California was the first. So there's a real possibility that it could pass in New Hampshire this year.
Yes, and there's a whole lot been going on about this. We've been in contact with Matt Simon from the New Hampshire Coalition for Common Sense Marijuana Policy Project, and he's been doing a lot with getting some interviews of medical marijuana patients and setting up some movie screenings, trying to get the public excited about this, because the public actually feels that it should already be legal in New Hampshire. A public opinion poll done last April, I believe, said that 71% of New Hampshire residents believed that this drug should be legalized for medical purposes for sick and ill patients, yet the legislature branch they're not getting it through. So hopefully this will be the time. We did catch up with Matt Simon when he was doing one of these movie previews here at Keene State College and letting people know about it, and we got some interviews and kind of covered the whole subject area. So let's take a look at the video.
We're here with Matt Simon of New Hampshire Common Sense, and you were here to screen a film here at Keene State College dealing with the medical marijuana issue. And as I understand it, New Hampshire Common Sense is tackling specifically the medical marijuana issue this year.
That's right. We have a new campaign. The home for the campaign is nhcompassion.org. There we have profiled several medical marijuana patients. We have information on the medical marijuana issue specifically, and our goal this year is to pass House Bill 648, which is a medical marijuana bill in the New Hampshire State Legislature.
So 13 other states, as I understand it, have passed medical marijuana legislation. Mm-hmm. How is New Hampshire's legislation similar to those states?
It's similar. The bill that we've got filed is similar to the laws in Maine, Vermont, and every other state, really, except California. We don't have the dispensaries or the cannabis clubs or anything like that. It will allow a patient with a serious illness who has a doctor's recommendation for marijuana. They can either grow it themselves or designate a caregiver to grow for them.
How much public support do you think there is currently for medical marijuana becoming legal?
Independent poll last April showed 71% of New Hampshire voters in favor and only 21% opposed. So we're going to get opposed by some members of law enforcement, possibly the Attorney General's office, but the vast majority of voters in New Hampshire do support this reform and are ready for this. So we're, like I said, very cautiously optimistic about this year.
So what can our viewers do if they want to get involved with the process and pushing this legislation forward? Where can they go to find out more about the legislation if they're curious about what exactly it says as well?
We strongly encourage people to visit nhcompassion.org, sign up for the newsletter. You'll find out where the hearing is. You get helpful tips on how to contact legislators, write letters to the editor. There's a lot of information on the website. There's a lot of information that will become available over the course of the next few weeks. And we hope people will stay tuned and spread the word about this. In New Hampshire, we have a very representative and very accessible legislature, 400 representatives. They do listen to their constituents, I think, far more so than in a lot of states. We have two esteemed state legislators in the room today. I would like to introduce Keene State Representative, the Honorable Charles Wheat.
But I think that the medical marijuana has a really good chance. And there have been an awful lot of people who make their decisions not based upon evidence, but upon dogma or on a belief system. And a lot of people are still thrown in jail for it. And I think that's why Rick Van Winkler, our jail superintendent, has joined the group called LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and I think is doing such an effective job as a member, an active member of the law enforcement community, talking about this wasted war on drugs, which is the equivalent of prohibition.
Well, you know, there's been propaganda going on for the last 100 years about marijuana, you know, but if you've ever seen the continuation of Devil Weed, the movie, the guy takes one puff on a joint and then stabs his wife. You know, I mean, it was done by people who had financial interest in marijuana and hemp remaining illegal. But facts today, cigarettes kill 500,000 people every year. Alcohol kills 100,000 every year. And marijuana's never been on a testimony. Not one, ever. Never killed anybody.
This is also a breast cancer survivor. Her name is Barbara Filial. She came all the way from Concord to tell us her story briefly.
I'm one of the people that was offered, I was diagnosed the first time with breast cancer in 1995, and someone that knew more about what I was going to be going through gave me, I guess, an ounce of marijuana. But I was too afraid. My husband at the time was a lawyer. I had a 9-year-old son. I was a psychologist. I felt like I couldn't take the risk. And when I look back at that time, it seems like such needless suffering that I could have availed myself of something that was a lot cheaper, probably would have been more pleasant than what I was going through.
And another thing that Matt Simon has been doing, besides going around and showing these previews and getting the public stirred up about this, has been trying to get some testimonials of marijuana patients. And you and I drove to Manchester and helped him film one of these testimonials with Scott Turner, who is a medical marijuana patient. So let's hear his story, why he believes that this drug should be legalized, not only in New Hampshire, but around the country for sick and ill patients. Let's take a look.
My name's Scott Turner. I'm 46 years old, live in Nashua, New Hampshire. Been here just about 6 years with my wife. We're originally from Boston. I have something called degenerative joint disease and degenerative disc disease. And they're pretty much exactly what they sound like. My discs and joints deteriorate. Because the discs deteriorate, I have pinched nerves in the back, one of which is the sciatic nerve, so it gets to be pretty painful. Well, I'm on a couple of different narcotics. I'm on morphine, reasonably high dose of morphine, backed up with Percocets as needed. They help to minimize the pain. They definitely don't eliminate it by any means. But the problem is, of course, it's, you know, you take too many of them and you get to be like a zombie, and you know, just the right amount of them helps to ease the pain, but you don't want to move. You don't want to do anything. You know, I've been having my orthopedic problems, my degenerative disc and joint problems since my teens. So I found out, just as sort of a normal course of things in my early 20s, when I was still using marijuana socially, that I was feeling better. If I smoked a little bit, my joints felt better. My back particularly felt better, and I was able to be more active. I was able to maintain my time in wrestling. And I mean, without the marijuana, I literally, you know, I've taken so many pills, or I'm so tired from the pills that I've taken, I don't want to move. I don't want to go anywhere. When I could substitute a large amount of those narcotics with a little bit of marijuana, again, as it relaxes my body and mind, and it makes me able to get up off the sofa and go out if we want to go see a movie, we want to go to dinner, even just to tour around in the summertime on my scooter. You know, that takes some energy, it takes some strength, and I'm able to do that with marijuana. But when it's purely narcotics, I couldn't be bothered. I had the chance to meet Barack Obama, when he was running for president. It was the summer of 2008 here in Nashua on one of his campaign stops. And at that point, I was able to meet him directly, shake his hand, and ask him to please vow to end the raids, the federal raids, DEA raids, on medical marijuana agents, or medical marijuana patients, rather, and dispensaries in the legal states. And he agreed that he would. He said that it was not a good way to spend federal money, so he agreed to end it. A medical marijuana bill in New Hampshire, medical marijuana law in New Hampshire, is vital to probably thousands of patients and potential patients. For me, it would mean I don't have to feel as though I'm taking a chance on being arrested for using medication. Without medical marijuana, there'd be no real life for me at all. You know, I'm 46 years old. My wife's 46. We want some kind of life. We should be able to have that here in America. If I could say any one thing, I think I would probably literally say, come spend a day with me and then tell me that I don't need any relief.
And of course, we will be bringing you more details on this as they come out. Right now, it's only in committee, and we don't even know when they're going to be hearing testimony on it. But hopefully, it has a pretty good chance here, at least if the representatives actually are representative of the people, because the people clearly want this. But we'll be bringing you the latest news as it comes out. For now, you can keep up to date with this on our website, freemindstv.com, or at nhcompassion.org. All right, moving right along here, let's go to the state where medical marijuana all first began, over in California. California right now facing some serious problems, not only with its budget issues, but also with the size of its prison population. It is over, I think, double what it's supposed to be. There's way too many people in the prison system right now. There's just not enough beds for them, and it's an unsafe place for the prisoners. A lot of them are dying, becoming sick, not having access to adequate health care, etc., just simply because there's not enough room. I mean, we're putting people in jail for these victimless crimes, and we have a court system that continuously just recycles people back into the court system, so they're pretty full. And a California court and the federal judges have ruled that they must release up to 1/3 of their prisoner population within the next 3 years. That's 57,000 inmates.
That's a lot of inmates, but the fact is, the reports I've heard on this overcrowding problem in California say that some prisons have prisoners double and triple bunked, 3 high bunk beds in gymnasiums, because there's just not room to put them in cells or even give them single beds on the gymnasium floor. They're literally stacked 2 or 3 high in some cases. So clearly there's not adequate facilities there for the number of people that California's keeping in prison.
Yeah, and I think this has a lot to do, we covered this a lot last week about the revolving door of the United States prison system. It has a lot to do with not only these vice crimes, but locking people up who haven't hurt anybody. And one thing that I find very telling from these bureaucrats who are, the public's a little bit nervous about this because you're letting 1/3 of the prisoner population out. They're there for a reason, right? Well, according to the bureaucrats, not so much. Judges said the move could be done, quote, without threatening public safety. Which brings me to question, well, if it could be done without threatening public safety, why wasn't it done years ago? Why did we put these people who aren't threatening public safety behind bars in the first place? I mean, if they're not hurting anyone or if they're not a threat to anyone, why do we need to pay to lock them in a cage? It just doesn't make sense to me. If the goal of the United States prison system is to rehabilitate people, but they're not of any kind of a danger on the street, why are we putting them there in the first place?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's one that should have been asked a long time ago, because the United States has been locking people up for years who, a large percentage of the prison population is there for simple drug possession or drug-related offenses, that if we weren't locking people up for those offenses, we wouldn't have probably half the prison population we have today. Now, granted, there are plenty of bad people in California's prisons or anywhere else in the country. I mean, there are murderers and rapists and, people who are a threat to society in those prisons. But a large number of them, a very significant number, are not a threat to anybody.
All right. Well, California has vowed to take this all the way to the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court. But until then, we'll see hopefully some nonviolent offenders, people who haven't even hurt anybody, will finally be freed from this and not stuck in the prison system and actually able to make something of their lives.
And hopefully, on the other side of it, hopefully they do keep the rapists and murderers in prison.
Clearly.
It wouldn't make sense for them to release those people, but then again, it's the government that runs the prison system, and their actions don't always make sense.
All right, Nick, speaking of the government and their actions not making sense, we like to focus in on Washington, D.C. once a week and what they're doing with the Downsizer Dispatch. What's going on this week?
This week, what Downsizer D.C. is doing is they're focusing on the fact that politicians in Washington essentially live in an echo chamber, and they're trying to focus more on what motivates politicians to listen to their constituents rather than focusing on any one campaign. Now, Downsizer DC is still encouraging people to go to downsizedc.org and take part in their Object to the Stimulus Scam Bill initiative, which is still going on because the stimulus package has not passed yet as of filming. That could happen any time now. So if you want to object to that, maybe get the politicians in Washington to at least reduce the size of that massive package, which could be $1 trillion, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. Go to downsizedc.org and sign up for the Downsizer Dispatch so you're on their email list. It makes it very easy to contact your representatives.
Absolutely.
And that's what we need to do. I mean, the fact is, most of what the politicians watch is the mainstream media, and the mainstream media, to a large extent, just backs up what the establishment view of the politicians. Most of the experts that they have on there are just going to agree with what the political establishment is doing. It's not a very balanced view, but that's what politicians are watching. And unless their constituents are actually taking the time to express a different viewpoint than what the politicians are going to be seeing in the mainstream media, they might not know that their constituents are mad about it.
Well, while the mainstream media might not be focusing in on the fringe issues and those wacko issues, we are. And when we come back, we'll be continuing to do so. Going over to China, where porn censors are now targeting, yes, Renaissance-era art. That and a whole lot more when we come back. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV.
Dave Ridley here from RidleyReport.com. Just wanted to urge Monadnock area viewers, please take Free Minds TV in moderation. You don't want your head to get loose and go floating around. Also, when you get to the courthouse for jury duty, please don't let the judge trick you. Don't ruin people's lives without good cause. You have the right and the duty to acquit any accused lawbreaker if you dislike the law. Visit fija.org to learn more.
Free Minds TV is brought to you in part by Life Productions for your basic and semi-pro video production needs. From full wedding and event coverage to DVD authoring and distributions, lifeproductions.com. That's lyfproductions.com.
Am I on? Am I on? Do I talk now? Do I talk now? I'm Gardner Goldsmith.
She's here.
And
I think she's up by where they're doing the show.
You're watching Free Minds TV. Open your mind, baby. Tell others to do the same.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV. As always, it's Toby here with you.
And Nick.
All right, Nick, I want to go over to China, visit other parts of the world where they're doing stuff even more crazy, at least right now, than what we're doing here in the United States. And that's with their internet policing. The Chinese really like to think that they're able to control the internet and censor what the public sees and what the public doesn't see. And today they just took it a step too far, a step that's really just humorous, unless you actually live there. If you live there, it's kind of tragic, but if you're over here, you've just got to laugh at how stupid these bureaucrats are. Right now, what they're doing is they're working to censor all pornography sites because you know you can't be looking at pornography, the human body. It's all unnatural and disgusting, might corrupt some minds. So they're going around the internet censoring different websites, different blogs that have these images. And they're including in their censoring what they call porn images of Renaissance era artwork. Yes, we're talking about the statues and the paintings made by people like Michelangelo, Leonardo. These are the paintings, the artwork that the Chinese government says is too pornographic for people to view on their home computers. Is this ridiculous, Nick, or am I just completely nuts?
It is ridiculous. If I remember right, I mean, obviously the government doesn't go that far here in the United States. For the most part, they leave pornography alone. But if I remember right, it was John Ashcroft who felt uncomfortable about one of the naked statues in the background in the Capitol building. It was part of the Greek artwork that had been there for probably over 100 years. Not sure how long, but he had that covered up because he felt it was an indecent statue. So it's more extreme in China. And you know, if a guy doesn't want the statue behind him, I guess that's not really infringing on people's rights the way it is in China. But there are politicians who think this way all over the world. And China right now is just one of the more egregious examples of these kinds of laws.
They'll censor out Michelangelo's paintings, yet when it comes to maybe throwing someone in the gulag or killing people in the name of patriotism, I mean, that's all fine. But when it comes to the human form, it's disgusting. disgusting. Get it out of here. All right, let's continue going around the world and go over to Saudi Arabia, a government that we help to prop up because, you know, they're rich in oil and they make people rich over here, so we like to prop up their government. And they're also a little bit ridiculous in some of their laws, having to do with marriage and forced marriage. It's not so much the female's choice who she marries all the time, or even when she's going to marry someone.
No, it's a very backwards. It's a very backwards part of the world. I mean, I know there are some people out there who are going to be offended by that, but most of the countries in the Middle East are not the most progressive, especially in the area of women's rights. And this story does illustrate that. In this case, a Saudi sheikh who is acting as a judge here has refused to annul a marriage, an arranged marriage, between an 8-year-old girl and a 47-year-old man. Now, the mother of this girl didn't so much like the fact that this girl was married off by her father, so she tried to take this to court. Well, the problem is in Saudi Arabia, they don't consider the mother a guardian or a parent of the child with any kind of standing in front of a court, and the father married off the daughter to settle his debts. Even though they're not the daughter's debts, they're the father's debts, so maybe he should be pimping himself out. But that's not how it works in Saudi Arabia. And the judge did go far enough to say that the 47-year-old man could not consummate the relationship until the girl hit puberty.
Well, that's
so I guess
good, at
that's
least.
Progressive in Saudi Arabia.
It's better than at 8 years old. Now, what I just find so interesting about this is a government that we help to prop up. So
we sell them weapons all the time.
So I mean, when people are saying, well, that's them, they're crazy over there, well, their government is propped up by us, and then we wonder why people around the world hate us, because we're propping up regimes that marry off 47-year-olds to little 8-year-old girls and say that's all great and okay.
And I mean, the policy is more rational than that, because at the same time we're doing hundreds of billions of dollars worth of arms deals with Saudi Arabia, sweetheart deals usually, or gifting them some weapons. We're also gifting weapons to Israel at the same time, because we say Israel needs to protect itself from Islamic extremists like these. You know, not everybody in Saudi Arabia has the same opinions, but obviously the fact that their legal system is structured in this way seems to tell me that there are quite a few Islamic fundamentalists in Saudi Arabia, but we're arming both sides. So not only are we arming Islamic fundamentalists, we're also arming Israel, and basically we're just pissing everybody off. We're giving guns to everybody who's involved in any kind of a conflict, and usually we're giving weapons to the tense areas of the world where they're likely to be used.
You know, Nick, it's so funny to think that people actually call us kooks and crazy people for thinking that we shouldn't be involved in this kind of crap around the world. But hey, I guess it's a fringe idea to say stay out of other people's business.
Yeah, and I believe, if I might be mistaken in this, but I think Saudi Arabia, they also send their military officers to the U.S. to train. So it's not just a matter of, well, we sell them weapons or we give them some foreign aid. I mean, the U.S. military assists in training the military of this country, where 8-year-olds are forcibly married to 47-year-olds.
All right, Nick, speaking of weapons and continuing around the world, let's go to the crazy people over in Britain where they really hate guns, and they think even the mere thought of a cowboy party style gun where you're having like cap guns and stuff is a requirement to have an armed patrol cars roll up and helicopters circling overhead in order to stop the mayhem that could ensue from such a thing. What's going on? What's the story?
Well, basically it was a fancy dress party being held in a pub in Leicestershire. I don't know.
Lakeshire.
I don't know. But it was a party being held by Roy and Val Worthington, and it was a Western-themed party. So obviously you're going to have Cowboys and Indians. Cowboys are going to have fake guns. I don't imagine the guns were too realistic looking. Of course, if you live in a country like Britain, where handguns are completely illegal and guns for the most part are completely illegal, the general public probably isn't too well informed about the difference between a toy gun and a real gun. They probably can't tell the difference, and they're just so scared that by guns in general that they're just going to overreact. I don't know why would they suspect that people were dressing up like cowboys with real guns? Did they think it was some kind of
the Indians are coming back or something?
Criminal
and then
enterprise?
Where are the Indians coming in with their bows and arrows and stuff? Where did they fit into this picture of these crazy wackos running around with guns?
I don't know, but apparently whoever called this in, and I think they said they got multiple calls. So it's more than one person. It's not just one person overreacting. It's apparently people are so scared of this in Britain that a number of people felt the need to call in. Well, the people putting on the party actually called into the police beforehand. It was some time beforehand. I think it was back in November. But they did let them know that, hey, we've got this party coming up, and it's going to be Western themed, and there are going to be people with toy guns. And that's why they called, because they knew that people would be concerned. And apparently the police forgot. So they sent a helicopter and 3 patrol cars with armed law enforcement
How much does this cost to bring in a helicopter
The helicopter
in order to bust
probably
this
costs
up?
a lot. You're talking 5 figures, I think.
Wow.
In U.S. dollars, I don't know about pounds. It's probably $10,000 or $20,000. I would think.
Wonderful.
Helicopter flights are expensive. Yeah, it's expensive.
Well, this is what the government does when you give them a monopoly on going after guns and bad guys, I guess. I mean, and it's just so baffling that they're this scared of an armed populace. People owning guns will get this kind of a response. I mean, it makes me almost take for granted what we have here, and we have so many gun restrictions here in the United States. I guess it could be much worse, but it just goes to show you gotta stand up right now and hold down your gun rights, or else this is what we could turn into.
Right, and if people don't stand up, this is what we will turn into, because Great Britain at one point, citizens were basically allowed to own firearms. They were probably never as free in regards to firearm ownership as the US, but it wasn't like guns have always been banned in Britain. It wasn't more than a decade or two ago that you could own handguns in Britain without too much ridiculous paperwork. So it happened there, it could happen here.
Well, it just goes to show you, stay alert and stay tuned to great programming like Free Minds TV. That's going to do it for us, but if you have a different opinion, we'd love to hear from you. fmtv@freemindstv.com is the email, or Toby@freemindstv, or Nick@freemindstv.com will also get you in touch with us. Log on to freemindstv.com for all the old archives of the show, ways to help the show, voting for the show on Podcast Alley, and a whole lot more, all at freemindstv.com. And also, don't forget to tune into Free Minds Radio this coming Sunday from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, every Sunday from them. Call in, let us know what's on your mind. And we've got some new affiliates this week, reaching out to more and more people, so that should be exciting. This Sunday, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Have a great weekend. So we're all done. Cool.
Well.
The deadly narcotic, more deadly, is the menace of marijuana.
Free Minds TV is brought to you by FreeKeen.com. FreeKeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. FreeKeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. FreeKeen.com.